Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
I've got those posters that you have behind you as well.
I swear I've had them for months. I'm not like the guy who shows up at the concert wearing like the band t-shirt. So I didn't put these up specifically for.
No, I mean, it's funny. I'm not in my study. I'm in an office, but in my study, I have those posters on the wall.
They're fantastic.
They are amazing.
Thank you again. I'm a huge fan of yours and have been for a long time.
Oh, thank you.
Also had to tell you the Sparks Brothers is still my favorite film of the year so far. I love that movie so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's coming out soon as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it in a theater.
It's quite funny to be juggling press for 3 different movies that all have S in the title. Era Soho, Sparks, and Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, and one of which you made a decade ago. So.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and kind of to jump into that, I'm curious how long this kind of Dolby version has been in the works and what all went into kind of this new version of the film.
I think it was something like what has been really nice about Scott Pilgrim is like for a film that did not do that well on its original release, usually when that happens, a studio is sort of embarrassed by it and it very quickly goes to kind of like DVD and Blu-ray and is maybe never spoken of ever again. And the nice thing is with Scott Pilgrim, that didn't happen. And I think sort of Universal, and it's one of those things that like sort of, I remember at the time, there was a lot of people kept asking me to sort of like try and point the finger of blame. And people kept saying like, oh, is it because of the poster? And people wanted me to point the finger of blame at somebody. And I would never do that because A, I didn't necessarily agree. And B, I knew that the marketing department at Universal absolutely loved the movie. And it is a funny thing. Michael Moses, who's like the head of marketing at Universal, he sent me the best email after the Monday after it came out, where like I was very proud of the movie, but it's that weird thing where you get emails from people where they're like, kind of think that you might be suicidal or something. And I was like, I'm still promoting the movie. I'm here in London about to do a premiere, so like I'm keeping upbeat about things. But he sent the best email that I've ever had about a movie. So it opens at number 5. I deliberately that weekend I did not read any of the trades. I think it's not a good thing. It's not useful in any way to read like Deadline or Box Office Mojo or any of those things. So I didn't, and I still never have. But he sent me this email, and all it said was he said, "Years, not days." Which is like one of the best emails about anything in my career I've ever received. Michael Moses just sent this email, and all it said was years, not days. And I was thinking, yeah, I mean, I know because most of my favorite movies didn't like make any money when they first came out. The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. That's 2 John Carpenter films, but I could think of more. Blade Runner. There's like tons of them that obviously like you think were hits, and then you realize, oh, that wasn't a hit when it came out. It's funny, like when you look at Big Trouble in Little China, it did not even crack the top 10 when it came out, which is like insane. But then I think about it, when I saw it in 1986, I was alone in the cinema watching it. But anyway, so the nice thing is I knew that like people there loved it. And also because over the years, sometimes there's never been a call for a sequel because I think it's just something that is financially like not manageable, but it was kept getting re-released on Blu-ray. More fucking Funko Pops than you could, you could fill a house with Funko Pops and Scott Pilgrim. And then occasionally you get calls from Universal saying, is there anything else we can do with Scott Pilgrim? And, and there's still some potential, I can't speak out of turn, but there's still some potential things that might happen in that regard. But with all that in mind, I had said, me and Michael had talked at some point. I said, why don't you guys should re-release it for the 10th anniversary? Everybody in the cast is now a megastar, and there's probably lots of people who never saw it on the big screen. And he said, hey, let me get back to you on that. And then he came back and said, Dolby Cinema would like to do a version of the movie. And I said, well, that's amazing. So basically, Dolby Cinema and AMC kind of partnered up, and that's how the kind of Dolby Cinema version came to be. And for me, it was actually sort of, unlike having to remaster some of my other films, this one was kind of like a complete walk in the park because I'm still working with the mixer and the editor and and the DP and colorist I've worked with very recently, so I could bring back the original team and saying like, hey, let's like, and so what was brilliant was like, whilst I was doing Sparks in Soho last year, Julian Slater finished like, actually it was before, he was sort of doing it around the same time as that we were finishing off Soho and Sparks, and Julian Slater was in LA and had taken all the original stems and basically remixed Scott Pilgrim in Atmos. And meanwhile, Stephen Nakamura, who was the original colorist, also kind of like did his Dolby Cinema 4K version of it. So I was in a very privileged position of just like watching what they'd done and had like no notes. I mean, maybe like one tiny thing, but it was sort of incredible watching it. And me and Paul Matchless, whilst we were finishing off Soho, went to the Dolby Cinema in Soho Square and sat there and watched a film that we'd made 10 years ago. And we're like, whoa. I always have this feeling when I watch films that I've made, especially something like Scott Pilgrim. I feel this even when I watch Space, because I watch it and I'm thinking, how the fuck did I do that? How the hell did we make that movie? It's like the actual like shooting days and what you did on any one day has sort of evaporated from your head. And I'd have to look at the shooting schedule again just to figure out how that film came to be. So, and what's nice about it is that I was also very aware that like there are obviously people that saw it at the time and loved it. There's other people who discovered it on Blu-ray or in repertory screenings. And then the other thing I've become very aware of is that like kids like it. And I know this because there's quite a few directors, friends of mine, who say to me, hey, would you sign a Scott Pilgrim poster for my son? Like, I've definitely done ones. There's more than this. Definitely done ones for like Sam Mendes, like J.J. Abrams, Jon Favreau, Jack Black just the other day. It's like, hey, could you sign a Scott Pilgrim poster for my son? So there's obviously like sort of like some 10 and 11-year-olds like who obviously did not see it when it first came out, who like love that movie. And I've heard that a lot from people. So it's nice in a way, like, I think in a strange way, even though it was supposed to come out last summer, the timing of it now with like a push to, now the vaccine is making its way around the world, like people are like slowly becoming more comfortable with going back to the cinema, and Kong versus Godzilla has proved that there is like sort of an audience that is waiting to come back. That like the timing of it weirdly is like perfect in a strange way. And in fact, I heard the other day that Brian Lee O'Malley tried to book tickets in Los Angeles and it was sold out. That can only be good news.
Well, it's kind of ironic because, I was going to ask you about that Years Not Days comment because I read that, and this film that a decade ago, was a box office disappointment is now not only positioned perfectly for people to go back to the movies, and you have this fan base, I'm sure many of whom have never seen it on the big screen, but also watching the trailer again, it's kind of ironic because it's like Chris Evans, Aubrey Plaza, Brie Larson. It's just this packed cast. You can market it as this huge blockbuster event now.
I mean, the funny thing is that the trailer that they did and the new poster is like my favorite trailer and favorite poster that we've ever had. And I did make that comment to like the producer. I said, where was this poster 10 years ago? And also the trailer was like, I mean, Universal did the trailer again. And I was like, they showed it to me. And again, it was that thing of like, that's the funny thing is the trailer now, you can like rattle off all those names. Back then, there was nobody above the title. Not even Michael was above the title when, it came out before. But, like, I can't, listen, I have no kind of like bitterness at all for like how it did 11 years ago. It just doesn't matter. And I sort of knew that at the time, even though it was I mean, basically when that kind of happens, more what you are thinking is like, will I be allowed to work again? That's your main priority is like, will they let me make another film? And so I've been very fortunate to kind of like, and also, I've worked with Universal again now twice since, and like, maybe about to do another one with them, so actually 3 times, I guess, with Sparks. So like, so that is, it's, what makes me very happy is it's not sort of considered a black mark for anybody. It's like that they're kind of like proud of, and like sort of becomes, you know, and it, like I said, it's like, you know, like you can sort of measure it in how much merchandise there is. It's
Yeah.
like ridiculous.
Well, and you mentioned, not knowing how you did it, and the making of doc. I've seen a number of times that every time I watch it, I just feel exhausted for you, just watching how you guys made that. But I'm a huge fan of Bill Pope, and I wanted to ask you. I read that part of hiring was to kind of calm any concerns on Universal's part of you handling a budget that big. But I was just curious how that relationship started, because I mean, you guys have worked together a number of times since then, and how that collaboration went forward, and then what his reaction was when you were like, "This is what we're going to do. These are how many different shots and setups we're doing here."
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because it was something that, and it's interesting because Jess Hall, who I'd worked with on Hot Fuzz, who did an amazing job on that film and is an incredible talent. Like, because we were both kind of sort of up and comers with that film, it wasn't something where, like, because Universal were nervous about it initially with Bill, it was like a slightly strategic thing. Is that like, okay, so they're nervous about what this is, but they'll be less nervous if I hire the cinematographer of The Matrix. And then, and that is exactly initially the reason that I met with Bill. Is because then Universal will be like, oh, he's got the Matrix guy? Okay, this makes sense. Now I get it, which is sort of how that worked. However, the thing with Bill, which was the surprise, is that Bill, in terms of like to answer your question, pitching it to him about this is what we're going to do, Bill has sort of done every shot that has ever existed. So he is, in the most brilliant way, kind of unflappable. If he has the kind of the time and the tools, there's nothing really that phases him. But that wasn't the thing that I really loved about working with him, and still love working with him. It's because he really, for somebody who's like such a brilliant visual artist, his main concern is about the emotion and the characters. So when I met him to talk about the Scott Pilgrim script, we only talked about the emotional aspect of it and about the characters and that side of it. So I came away from that meeting thinking, well, that's unexpected. It was almost like he kind of like sort of was completely unfazed by my visual ambitions. I was more focused on, kind of what was at the heart of the story. And really, that's something that he's so brilliant with actors, Bill, and he's such a brilliant, he sort of really shoots actors in an incredibly kind of, what's the word? Kind of like, I don't want to say intimate, but it's something that like, he gets the best out of them visually in terms of just kind of like sort of capturing what they do, but making sure they look amazing doing it. And I think you can see that, especially in like Scott Pilgrim and Baby Driver. I skipped over The World's End because everybody's supposed to look terrible in that movie.
And that's maybe my favorite of your films. I adore that film. I think Simon's incredible in that movie.
He is. I think that's Simon's best performance. I think he would agree with that as well.
A big topic of conversation among the fans is obviously the ending, and the original ending is on the Blu-ray. And I was always just curious from your perspective. I know that didn't test as well. You shot a new ending. What do you have a preference between the two endings? Do you think the theatrical one works?
No, I think the theatrical one is the one. I think the thing is that we wrote that ending, and I think when me and Michael Bacall wrote that ending, Brian had not finished the books. He had an outline. By the time we were sort of making it, there were 3 books out, and Brian had the outlines for the final 3. But then Brian didn't really stick to those outlines. He kind of just was, kind of having fun, sort of inventing it as he went along. And I think once he'd read the screenplay, I think in a way probably in a very George R.R. Martin way, it sort of encouraged him to sort of like, well, I'm going to do something different, because I think he wanted, and I totally understand, he needed ownership of the books. And so he said, oh, I know what they're doing in the film, so I'm going to do something different. So what Brian eventually did was different from the outlines that we had. And that was fine, because I kind of felt like, well, this is okay for these things to diverge. It is an adaptation. And then I think the thing is, the ending that we'd written, there was one aspect to it which did not land, and I'll tell you why it didn't land. I think me and Michael Bacall originally, we were sort of trying to write an ending that was in the vein of The Graduate or The Heartbreak Kid, where like our hero gets what he wants, but maybe that isn't what he needs. And there was that realization that kind of like he'd sort of, you know, won the battle but lost the war. And that was the idea of it. But then trying to do that scene or that tone with Ellen Wong, the most adorable actress on the planet,
Yes.
it just didn't feel right. It felt like, this is like, this trying to do this kind of ending is unfair on Knives and unfair on Ellen. And so we basically didn't really shoot the ending that we'd written. And so then what we originally test screened was sort of like as it was on the Blu-ray. And some people really liked it. And then sometimes in test screenings, people would literally say, I mean, there's some people I know that really like the ending as it was. But, you know, sometimes you go to test screenings. And I remember this vividly. We had this test screening where we were like, we'd scored like an 81. It was like the fourth test screening. We'd scored an 81, which is high. But somebody in the focus group, and funny enough, it's like somebody that I figured out who it was afterwards because we were sort of friends on Twitter. It's this lady called Nicole Klepper. And all I was looking at was the back of her head. And I remember in a focus group, people were saying nice things about it. And then one hand came and said, I love this film. I love every frame. I love every scene. I love every character. I really, really do not like that ending. And it was weirdly like just other people had said it, but nobody had said it in quite such strong terms. So I went away and I talked to Michael Bacall and Brian Lee O'Malley about it. And I think Universal thought that I was going to be stubborn and just stick to it. I think they thought, well, 81's good, and maybe the ending's a bit divisive, but like, let's finish the movie. I went away and I think I showed it to a couple of people. And maybe I showed it to J.J. Abrams, actually. I think I showed it to him on the lot. And I said to him that I was thinking about a new ending. And he said, what would you change? And I said, well, I sort of been talking about a way of like him getting together with Ramona, not in a way that's very conclusive, but the idea that it's like there's like maybe a chance to start over, rather than him just go off with her like and it be into the sunset. It's more the idea that they're going to start again. And he said you should try and write that ending and see how it feels. So that weekend, me and Brian Lee O'Malley and Michael Bacall got together and we wrote what the new ending is. And Brian Lee O'Malley, and this is what's great, Brian Lee O'Malley helped us write the new ending, which was also different again from the books, but different from what we'd done. And we're sort of trying to sort of crack it. And the key to it was that Knives lets him go. And the real key to it is Brian Lee O'Malley's line, which is like, he wrote this line, is Knives' line, I'm too cool for you anyway. Like, that's it. That's the line. That's the line. And what was amazing then I had this thing where, I think I've told this story before, but it's true. When we were going to do the new ending, I was most nervous about calling Ellen Wong, because I worried that Ellen Wong was going to think, oh, so I'm not the romantic lead at the end. He's going to go off with Ramona. Okay, so that sucks. But then when I told her, I said, so we're going to shoot a new ending. And then when I told her what it was, she goes, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because I was thinking Knives is like too proud to take him back. It makes her look really weak that she takes him back after he cheated on her. And I was thinking, oh, thank God. And she said, she goes, oh, I love that line. You know, I'm too cool for you anyway. So even that, before we shot anything, I'm thinking, okay, this is going in the right direction. And so we shot that scene. We shot all the new bits. It was like some other bits as well. It's funny. There's little bits. There's one like meme from the film that was like a late addition. The little shots of, I tell you what we shot. It was like, the stuff at the end, including a bit with young Neil that we never put in the movie. So Johnny Simmons came all the way to Toronto for one shot that we ended up thinking, oh, this is gilding the lily. Let's take this out. It was literally the idea as soon as like Knives was single, like young Neil came into frame with the bass guitar. But it was just one joke too many. The original ending still had the Negascott thing with the kind of the brunch thing. That was all in there. It was literally the dialogue that they had. So we shot the ending, and then the other things that we shot was like Gideon saying about like, do you know how long it took me to the line about, do you know how long it took me to put the league together? Like 2 hours. That's new. The other thing that is new that's funny that we shot because we had no punctuation was when Chris Evans is going down the rail. The shots of Kieran and Michael going, wow, that was new. So
those are perfect.
We actually had to build the top of the steps, and we had to build the top of the pyramid. So definitely like, and I think some of those extra things, Universal were like, whatever, like you can make that work in the budget, fine, but we only want the ending. And I was like, we're going to do the ending, and we're going to just do these other little bits. That's basically how it panned out. And then, but it was finished. That was shot in May. I remember because I couldn't go to my best friend's wedding. I was like in May. And then for an August release, so some long lead critics screenings were with the original ending. And then there were some people, I mean, I think the new ending is better by miles. And like, as soon as we test screened the new ending, the scores went up again. But there was occasionally people saying, oh, I can't believe you changed the ending. And I've said, it wasn't right. It wasn't right.
I could ask you a million more questions, and I know I'm almost out of time for you. But I believe you alluded on Twitter to potentially re-releases of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the Cornetto films. Is that also in the works?
I didn't say that. Somebody asked me if that was happening, and I said, I just replied and said, over to you, Dolby Cinema. No, I did not say that. But if they want to, sure.
I will ask Dolby Cinema, just make this a summer of Edgar Wright movies. Just release all of your films again in theaters to get theaters back ahead of Soho. Thank you so much.
I mean, I'm down. If they want to do that, I'm fine. Let's remaster them all in Dolby Cinema.
Thank you so much for your time, and congrats on Sparks Brothers, and can't wait to see Soho.
Cool. Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care.
Cheers, bye.